The moment Victor slid my ring off my finger in front of 40 people, I didn't cry. I remember thinking that was strange. My grandmother's ring, not the diamond eternity band Victor had replaced it with after his bonus year, but the original one, the thin gold band with the tiny sapphire she'd worn for 51 years, was sitting in his palm, and he was already folding his fingers around it like it was a cufflink he'd misplaced. And I just stood there in the middle of the Fairmont Ballroom in Vancouver with a glass of Pinot Gris in my hand, thinking, so this is what it looks like. The woman he took it off for was standing 6 feet away. Her name was Audrey. She worked in corporate law, she'd gone to UBC the same year Victor had, and apparently they'd dated for 3 years before he met me. She had the kind of effortless put-together look that makes you feel like you've been misdressing your whole life. Silk charmeuse in a color I don't have a name for, hair like she hadn't tried. Victor was whispering something to me. Low, fast, urgent. His hand was on my elbow. Just for tonight, he said. She doesn't know. I never told her I got married. It'll be a whole thing. Please, Harper. Please, Harper. I'd been his wife for 4 years. My last name was Aldridge Moss, hyphenated because I'd insisted and he'd said, of course, whatever you want. I'd moved cities for him, from Halifax to Vancouver, where I didn't know a single person besides his friends who were really his friends. I'd spent 4 years learning which wines he preferred, and how he took his coffee when he was stressed versus when he was content, and how to read the particular silence he used when he was disappointed in me, but didn't want to say so. And in the middle of a fundraiser gala for BC Children's Hospital, in front of the managing partners of Aldridge Capital and their wives, he was asking me to pretend I didn't exist. Victor, I said. Just tonight. He was already pocketing the ring. I'll explain everything later. I don't know why I didn't say something then. I've asked myself that question many times since. But the truth is that I was so stunned, not by what he was doing, because some part of me had suspected something was wrong for months, but by how small it made me feel. 40 people in my peripheral vision, champagne in my hand, and I was suddenly just a woman in a room who didn't belong to anyone. I excused myself, went to the washroom, sat on the edge of a marble vanity counter with my bare left hand in my lap and stared at the indent where my grandmother's ring used to be. I gave him 40 minutes. I sat at the table assigned to me. The wrong table, I noticed, 2 seats down from where my name card should have been, evidently rearranged, and I drank my wine and smiled at the people around me and answered questions about what I did. Physiotherapist. I worked at a sports medicine clinic in Kitsilano. Yes, Victor and I had been together almost 5 years. No children yet. Audrey ended up at our table. Of course she did. She was perfectly pleasant. She asked what I did, and I told her. And she said that was fascinating. She'd had a shoulder injury a few years back. She asked how long I'd been in Vancouver. I said 4 years. She said she loved this city, couldn't imagine living anywhere else. Victor sat beside her and touched the back of her chair when he sat down. Just a casual, proprietary touch. The kind of touch you don't think about because it's unconscious. I noticed. Dinner came. I ate. Victor gave a short speech about the foundation because he sat on their board, and he was good at speeches. He always had been. People applauded. Audrey applauded. I applauded. And when the dessert plates were being cleared and someone on Victor's other side pulled him into a conversation about a development project in Burnaby, Audrey leaned towards me slightly and said quietly, "You seem sad." I looked at her. She wasn't being unkind. She had the expression of someone who genuinely noticed things. "I'm fine," I said. "You don't have to be," she said. And then someone called her name from across the table, and she turned away, and that was that. On the drive home, Victor talked about the evening the whole way. Which partners he'd spoken to, which conversation had gone well, the development deal, the foundation's new initiative. He talked the way he always talked after events, like he was debriefing himself, not speaking to me. I watched the lights of the Granville Bridge go by and said nothing. At home, in our kitchen, he set his keys down and finally turned to look at me. "You were great tonight," he said. Something cracked open in my chest. "My ring," I said. He crossed to the counter, picked up his jacket from the back of the chair where he'd draped it, and reached into the inner pocket. He set the ring on the granite between us like a peace offering. I said I'd give it back. "You took it off my hand in front of your colleagues." "It was a 5-second thing, Harper." "It's not. I needed Audrey to think. I know what you needed." The silence that followed was the kind that has too much weight to fill. Victor looked at me for a moment, then looked away, and I understood in that moment, really understood, the way you understand things that have been true for a long time. that he was not going to apologize. He was waiting for me to let it go. That was what our arguments looked like. He would do something, I would show that it hurt me, and then we'd both wait to see how quickly I would absorb it and move on. And I always did. I always had. I picked up the ring. I went to bed. I lay in the dark for 3 hours before I heard him come in. He settled on his side without a word. His breathing evened out in 20 minutes. I didn't sleep at all. My mother-in-law's name is Constance. She called me the next morning at 9 while Victor was at the gym. Constance was not an unkind woman in the way that some mothers-in-law are unkind. She wasn't cold or dismissive. She was, in her own way, genuinely fond of me. But she was the kind of woman who organized her love around outcomes, and the outcome she'd always had in mind for her son had a specific shape that I was adjacent to but never quite. I heard last night was a bit of a hiccup, she said. I had no idea how she already knew. The Aldridge family had an information network that functioned with a speed and efficiency that I found both impressive and unsettling. Did Victor call you? He mentioned you were upset. Mentioned I was upset. As though I'd become upset spontaneously, without cause. He took my ring off, I said. In front of everyone. I know. A pause. Harper, Victor has a complicated history with Audrey. Her father is on the foundation board. The optics of Constance. He took my wedding ring off. Another pause. Longer this time. I think, she said carefully, that it would help everyone if you came for brunch on Sunday. Victor wants to talk. We all do. I'm making the eggs Benedict. That was Constance's move. She was an excellent cook, and she deployed it strategically as a kind of social WD-40. Eggs Benedict meant, let's pretend this is a normal family conversation. Let's keep things smooth. Let's not escalate. I'll think about it, I said. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Through the window, I could see the neighbor's magnolia tree, the one that bloomed outrageously every April and then dropped everything in 2 weeks. Victor's ring was on my hand again. I'd put it on automatically that morning, the way you do with something you've worn for years. I took it off, set it on the table, looked at it. My grandmother Edith had worn that ring from 1967 until she died. She'd been the kind of woman people didn't argue with, not because she was harsh, but because she was so clearly right about everything that arguing felt wasteful. She'd said to me once, when I was 19 and upset over some boy, Harper, the people who make you feel like you have to earn your place in a room are not your people. I'd thought I'd understood what she meant. I wasn't sure I had until last night. I didn't go to Sunday brunch. I called my best friend, Rosie, instead. Rosie was a family physician in Ottawa, which meant our friendship existed mostly in long phone calls and the occasional cross-country visit. But she'd known me since we were 8 years old, and she had a particular talent for cutting through the version of things I told myself. Tell me exactly what happened, she said. I told her. All of it. The ring, the 40 minutes at the wrong table, Audrey's hand on the chair, the drive home, the ring placed on the granite between us like a receipt. There was a silence on the line. Harper, Rosie said. How long has this been going on? It was one event. I'm not talking about last night. I didn't answer for a moment. I don't know, I said. Yes, you do. I did. I think I'd known for about 8 months that something was wrong in a way that was structural, not circumstantial, not a bad patch, not work stress. Something in the architecture of our marriage that had been quietly load-bearing and was now, under examination, revealed to be hollow. I'd just been deciding not to know it. I need you to promise me something, Rosie said. What? Don't absorb this one. Don't let it become a thing that happened that you move past. Because I think if you move past this one, there won't be any moving back. I held the phone and looked at the magnolia tree. Okay, I said. I mean it. I know you mean it. What happened over the next 6 weeks was a version of things I have seen happen to other women, and always believed, from a comfortable distance, that I would handle differently. Victor apologized. Not immediately, not the way I'd needed him to in the moment, but he apologized. On the Tuesday following the gala, in the kind of measured, structured way that made the apology feel like a memo. He acknowledged that taking the ring had been wrong. He said he'd been panicked. He said Audrey's father's support for the foundation was significant, and he hadn't wanted to complicate it, and he knew that wasn't a good enough reason, and he was sorry. I asked him directly, was there something between him and Audrey now, not in the past, but now? He said no. He looked me in the eyes and said no, and I believed him, or I chose to believe him, which I understood were two different things. Constance took me to lunch at the Hotel Georgia the following week, just the two of us, which she'd never done in 4 years. She ordered the salmon and talked to me about her own marriage. Victor's father, Dennis, who died of a sudden heart attack 7 years earlier when Victor was 32. She talked about Dennis's stubbornness, his particular way of being right that had exhausted her, and how much she'd missed him anyway. Victor is his father's son, she said, in the good ways and the bad ways. What does that mean practically? I said. She looked at me. It means he doesn't know how to be wrong. It's not that he doesn't want to. He genuinely doesn't have the equipment for it. Dennis was the same. That's not something I can fix. No, she said. It isn't. I respected her for that. For not saying, give it time, he'll change, he loves you, you know how men are. She just sat there with her salmon and told me the truth as she understood it. But then she said, he needs you, Harper. Whatever that's worth to you, he needs you in a way that he doesn't know how to say. And that was the thing that stayed with me in the weeks after. He needs you. Not, he loves you. Not, he values you. He needs you. As if my function in the marriage had always been structural rather than chosen. As if I were a load-bearing wall he'd rather not have noticed until he was afraid of what might happen without it. I went back to work. I treated 7 patients a day. I ate lunch at my desk. I drove home on the Burrard Bridge with the radio on. I smiled at Victor's texts and replied to Constance's occasional check-ins. I went to Rosie's for a long weekend in October and didn't tell Victor I was going until the night before. Is something wrong? He said. I just need to see my friend. He let it go. He usually let things go when they were about me, because the things that were about me were small enough to let go. I found the emails on a Tuesday in November. I wasn't looking. I want to be very clear about that. I wasn't snooping or suspicious in the way that might be dismissed as paranoid. Victor had asked me to print a document from his laptop, because the printer in his home office was connected to it, and he was rushing out the door for an early meeting, and the laptop was open on the kitchen table. The email was open on the screen. Not minimized. Open. It was from Audrey. The subject line was a date. Just a date, which should have been innocuous but wasn't, not with what was in the body of the email. 3 paragraphs. I read all 3 without meaning to. The way you read something your eyes have already taken in before your brain tells them to stop. I printed his document. I put the laptop back where it had been. I drove to work. I saw 7 patients that day. I smiled. I made small talk about hockey with the young man I was treating for a rotator cuff injury, because that was November in Vancouver, and hockey was always there. I ate lunch at my desks. That evening, I called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia. I'd been referred through Rosie's network. No connection to anyone, Victor knew. She was a family law specialist in Burnaby, and she was straightforward in a way that felt almost merciful. She explained what a separation would look like. We'd been married 4 years. I'd left employment in Halifax to relocate. There were financial considerations. She walked me through them without drama. Do you have a sense of timeline? She asked. I need a few months, I said. I need to make sure I'm doing this right. Take the time you need, she said. But start keeping records. Financial records, any communications that seem relevant. Don't do anything dramatic. Just document. I started documenting. I didn't move out. I didn't change anything visible. I went to bed next to Victor. I sat across from him at dinner. I attended his firm's Christmas party in December. In a green dress he'd said he liked, and stood next to him and smiled at Audrey when she arrived, because of course she arrived, and she was just as pleasant as she'd been at the gala. She asked about my shoulder rehabilitation work. She said she'd been dealing with some neck stiffness and asked if I had any recommendations. I gave her the name of a colleague, because I am a professional, and she had asked a professional question, and none of this was her fault. In January, I told Victor I wanted to go to Halifax for 2 weeks to see my family. He said that was fine. He said he'd miss me. He said it in the voice he used when he was saying something, because it was what you said. I went to Halifax. I saw my mother, my brother, my niece and nephew, who were 8 and 6 and gloriously uncomplicated. I sat in my mother's kitchen at the same table, where I'd done homework as a child, and told her the truth. She put both hands around her mug. She didn't say anything for a moment. Are you sure? She finally said. Not are you sure he cheated. She'd already understood that. Are you sure about what came next? Yes, I said. Okay. She reached across and squeezed my hand. Then we'll help you. The night I came back from Halifax, Victor picked me up from YVR. He carried my bag to the car. He'd brought a coffee from the Tim Hortons in the terminal. Medium double-double, which was how I'd taken it the first year we were together, when we were in Halifax, and I was still doing the Nova Scotia version of myself. I'd switched to oat milk lattes 3 years ago. He didn't know that, or had forgotten. I held the double-double the whole drive home without saying anything. At the house, while he was bringing in my suitcase, I called Patricia. "I'm ready," I said. We'd agreed on what ready meant. Patricia had a colleague who specialized in serving documents to senior executives in ways that were legally airtight and interpersonally, her word, precise. I'd given her everything she needed 2 weeks earlier. The financial records I'd gathered, the communications, everything documented, dated, organized in the way she'd taught me to organize it. Victor was served on a Thursday morning, in late January, at his office on Burrard, in front of his assistant, and no one else. His assistant, from what I later understood, quietly pretended not to notice. He called me 4 times in the next hour. I was with a patient and I didn't answer. When I got home that evening, he was there. He was sitting at the kitchen table with the documents in front of him, and for the first time in 5 years, he looked like a man who didn't know what to say. "How long?" he said. "Since November. Since I found out, yes." He put his hands flat on the table. "Harper, I need you to understand that whatever you saw." "Victor." I set my bag down. I stood across the table from him. "I've retained Patricia Weston. You should probably get your own counsel. I'd suggest you do it soon." The silence in that kitchen was enormous. Outside, someone's car alarm went off briefly and then stopped. "I still love you," he said. I believed him, actually. I believed that he loved me in the particular, limited way that he was capable of love. The way that allowed for what he'd done, that had always made room for Audrey alongside me, that required me to be small and smooth, and never demand more than he wanted to give. "I know you do," I said. "It's not enough." Constance called me the next morning. She didn't beg. She wasn't angry. She said she'd heard, she was sorry it had come to this, and she wanted me to know that whatever happened between me and Victor, she had respected me, and she still did. Then she said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." "Okay." "Was there anything I could have said to you? At the Hotel Georgia or after? Was there something I could have done differently?" I thought about it honestly. "You told me the truth," I said. "That he didn't have the equipment. I heard you. But I needed to find my own way to believe it." She was quiet for a moment. "I think," she said, "that you are going to be just fine." "I think so too," I said. The separation was filed in February. The paperwork moved with the particular tedious efficiency of legal processes when both parties have good lawyers and enough money to avoid a prolonged fight, which we did, and Victor, to his credit, did not drag it out in the way he could have. There was one afternoon in March when we were both at the house going through logistics. Who would keep what? Timelines, the condo that was technically both of ours. And we ended up standing in the kitchen for a moment without a task in front of us, just standing there. And Victor said, quietly, "I'm sorry I didn't know how to do better." I looked at him for a long moment. "I believe you," I said. And then, "You should probably know she's not going to fix it either. Whatever you think Audrey is, she's not going to fix the part of you that doesn't know how to do better. That's yours to figure out." He didn't say anything, but he didn't look away either. In April, I rented a 1-bedroom in East Van, near the drive. It had a small balcony where I put 2 chairs and a table from IKEA and a plant that I was determined not to kill. The building was older, the floors were uneven, and the woman upstairs had a dog that went through an enthusiastic phase every morning around 6:30. I loved it. Rosie came to visit in May. We sat on the balcony, and I made wine happen, and we talked until nearly midnight. She told me about a man she'd met at a medical conference. I told her about the new patient I was treating, a marathon runner from Coquitlam trying to qualify for Boston at 53, which I found quietly thrilling to be part of. "You seem different," Rosie said. "Different how?" She thought about it. "Heavier," she said, "but the right kind of heavy. Like you're actually in your body." I looked at the lights on the street below. The drive on a warm spring night, restaurants full, dogs on leashes, someone playing guitar outside the cafe on the corner. My grandmother used to say, I started, and then I stopped, because I wasn't sure how to say what I was thinking. "What?" Rosie said. She said the people who make you feel like you have to earn your place in a room aren't your people. I turned the wine glass in my hands. I spent 4 years earning. I thought that was just how it worked. That love was something you maintained, like a retaining wall. And now? I thought about the balcony, the plant, the uneven floors, the 6:30 dog. "Now I'm in a room I don't have to earn," I said. My grandmother's ring was on my hand. I'd had it sized, finally. It had always been slightly too big, and I'd lived with the small anxiety of it slipping. It fit perfectly now. Had for 2 months. I raised my glass to Rosie. She raised hers back.